All right, we're back. Let's go ahead with additional testimony.
Mr. Chairman, is this mic on? Can you tell? Okay. Mr. Chairman, we have Darren Frederickson as our next witness. Mr. Frederickson, please introduce yourself to the commission.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Darren Frederickson. I am a partner at Merit Advisors out of Gainesville, Texas. I have almost 29 years of property tax experience. I'm a licensed senior property tax consultant with a license in Texas, and have hundreds of hours of training in the property tax evaluation areas and as well as the oil and gas industry in general.
Can you describe your educational background for the commission, please?
Yes, I've attended trainings and seminars and conferences and lead seminars sometimes all over the United States in oil and gas and property tax.
And you've given us just a little snippet of your work background. For how many years have you been working in Louisiana filing the rendition forms?
Since 1991.
And so since 1991, for how many of those years have you been filing rendition forms and doing tax compliance in relation to oil and gas properties?
The entire time.
So now we'll turn our attention to tax compliance. Were you hired by Perdido Energy Louisiana LLC, which I'll refer to as Perdido from now on, to handle its property tax compliance related to the purchase of oil and gas properties that we've been discussing here today in the December 2017 transaction?
I was.
Did you discuss the parish annual LAT reporting forms with the president of Perdido Energy Louisiana LLC, Mr. Josh Holden?
I certainly did.
Did Mr. Holden authorize you to file the annual renditions in the parishes that we have discussed today, Acadia, Beauregard, Evangeline, Rapides, and Vernon?
Yes, ma'am. He authorized us to file all those forms.
Did you timely file the renditions or the LAT forms for 2018 in each of those parishes?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
In addition to the LAT forms, did you submit a cover letter to the assessors?
Yes, ma'am. Each parish had a cover letter on the front.
And along with the cover letter, the rendition forms, did you file anything else with those?
Yes, ma'am. With each one, we had a copy of the complete PSA for the deal, as well as the appraisal Mr. Calvinico had prepared.
So now I'd like to direct your attention to the big book of exhibits.
Yes, ma'am.
And turn to Exhibit 3.
Oops. Chair's trying to trip me up there. All right. Yes, ma'am.
And the first page of Exhibit 3, can you identify that, please?
Yes, ma'am. It's the cover letter. This one happens to be the one for Acadia Parish.
And is the content of that cover letter the same for each of the 5 parishes?
Yes, ma'am. I believe it is.
So does your letter expressly state that the purchase and sale agreement was submitted along with the rendition forms?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
And does your cover letter expressly state that the Loop Capital appraisal was submitted
Yes, ma'am.
along with the rendition forms?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Let's look at the last paragraph
Okay.
of your letter.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe to the commission what that last paragraph says?
Yes, ma'am. It's probably just easier to read it, and then I can kind of explain. The paragraph is brief. It's our intention to come to your parish and discuss these assessments and package with you at your convenience. Both Merritt and Perdido want to work with you to arrive at assessments that make sense based on the acquisition, the appraisal, and the guidelines set by the Louisiana Tax Commission. It's an offer to meet, talk, whatever we could possibly do. Mr. Holden was made everything available for us, so we wanted to make sure it was available to everyone.
So subsequent to the filings of the rendition, what we'll call the packages, which would be the cover letter, the rendition forms, the purchase and sale agreement, and the Loop Capital appraisal. So subsequent to filing those rendition packages, did any of the assessors, any of the parishes, Acadia, Beauregard, Evangeline, Rapides, Vernon, or anyone from their offices reach out to you or anyone at Merit Advisors?
Not to my knowledge, no, ma'am.
So subsequent to the filings of the rendition packages, did you or anyone else at Merit Advisors reach out again following up to the assessor's offices?
Yes, ma'am. A few months before the rolls opened, the team reached out to each of the parishes to ask, can we? What do you need anything? What can we do? I was not privy to the exact verbiage of the conversation, but I've reviewed their notes. And then I did contact one of the parishes myself. Assessor Dakota and I have some history with these wells. We worked on them earlier in our career, so we just chatted for a little bit about that.
So during the communications with the assessors and/or anyone in their office, were there any questions about the rendition forms that were filed?
No, ma'am, not to my knowledge.
Did any of the assessors or anyone in their offices have any questions about the purchase and sale agreement that was filed along with the renditions?
No, ma'am, not to my knowledge.
Did the assessor or anyone in their office have any questions about the Loop Capital appraisal that was filed?
No, ma'am.
Did the assessor or anyone in their offices have any questions about the purchase price?
No, ma'am.
So during those communications with the assessor's offices, was there any additional information that was requested by the assessor or anyone in their office in addition to what had been submitted along with the rendition forms?
No, ma'am, not to my knowledge.
Did any of the assessors offer any additional obsolescence?
I believe that Beauregard Parish did offer 15% when the conversations were going on.
And do you know how the assessor calculated that 15%?
I do not.
So let's turn to the renditions now, which are behind your cover letter.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
let's talk about how
Let
you
me
prepared.
interrupt 1 second.
Yes.
So, you said that you or someone from your group did meet with each of the assessors?
Called to see if-
Telephone call?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
And there's in emails, yes, sir.
and to discuss,
To see if there was anything we could provide or do. Yes,
okay.
sir.
So basically to discuss everything that you submitted to them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And nobody asked for additional information?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay.
So Beauregard was the only one that gave?
They
obsolete-
offered, we didn't, we didn't accept so it was not applied.
Okay,
my
so
belief.
15% was not applied?
It's not my belief, sir, it was.
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't want to forget.
So back to the renditions.
Yes.
Can you walk us through how the rendition forms were prepared?
Yes, ma'am. So what we had is we had a recent acquisition with the sale. We had an appraisal to work with, and the appraisal had the income approach and the cost approach both on it. Knowing that the preference of this commission, and obviously I've been before this commission many times talking about cost approach, we relied solely on the cost approach that Mr. Calvanico had come up with. What we did, though, we knew if we needed to stay within the format that the assessors were used to for ease of use. So we took Mr. Calvanico's, we ran the LATs as we normally would through our software, the footage, everything using exactly the rules of the tax commission. Then we took Mr. Calvanico's answer on his appraisal and we backed into the obsolescence it would take to get to the difference between what the schedule called for and what Mr. Calvanico's number was. And we identified that on the back page of each of the LATs.
So you followed the tables
Yes, sir.
as written?
Yes, sir.
Up to the point of the consideration of additional obsolescence?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
So the number that you came up with at that point
Was-
should be the same number
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
within?
And I know exactly where, and we can explain.
So I mean,
the variance.
what I'm getting to is that this discussion is really getting down to obsolescence.
Yes, sir. For our simple purposes, the way we needed to follow the rules, and we had a value, and I'm not an appraisal expert, so I didn't try to go through what he had done. So we just married the two for compliance purposes, and then provided the data we had to support that.
Okay. So basically what we're discussing, all said and done, we're really getting down to obsolescence.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
it's-
And again, you focused on the cost approach valuation that was provided in the Loop Capital appraisal.
Yes, ma'am.
So let me direct your attention now to Exhibit 13, which is in the small book.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this exhibit is?
Yes, this is a summary that was prepared to show all the assessment numbers, the values between what was rendered and what was assessed, and then to show the amount of tax paid under dispute and the total tax.
And it's broken out by parish.
By parish, by assessment number. Yes, ma'am.
And then on the second page of this exhibit, let's look down at the totals.
Yes, ma'am.
And the assessor value number for the totals of all the parishes is what?
$58,609,795.
And the taxpayer fair market value as rendered.
$8,517,546.
Okay, so as rendered, you've got $8,517,546. However, the Calvanico report
Yes.
shows a total, rounded, of $10,860,000
Small.
for the value of the assets using the cost approach.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain the discrepancy?
Yes, ma'am. As has been talked about quite a bit today, there was non-op interest. Mr. Calvanico put value on those. As for our compliance purposes for reporting the LATs, the $2.5 million roughly that was attributable to the non-operated interest in the purchase, in his appraisal, was not rendered because the operator of record files the LAT for all the wells. So the non-op, we filed on the 63 wells operated, roughly 63 wells operated by, plus the equipment and things operated by Perdido. The balance of that would have been handled through LATs from the other operating companies. So there was a 10.86 number, and then there was we had
So
the.
there are other companies that are reporting on these properties as well, is that correct?
The operator for all the 40-some-odd non-operated interest, and since in Louisiana, we're not assessing the mineral interest, we're doing the
Right.
personal property, the operator reports those LATs. So everyone that owns an interest in a well does not report on the LAT, the operator does. So that, the wells that would not have been the responsibility of Perdido, we excluded from the filings.
Okay, so you're reporting only on the well itself?
Everything that was in the reports that we were provided allocated back to Mr. Calvanico's report.
So the appraisal included everything?
Yes, sir, correct.
The well and everything associated with it?
Yes, sir, and including non-op interests.
Including that, and then you are reporting here just the assets that you own, that Perdido?
Perdido operates and
Louisiana.
controls. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And to be clear, can we turn your attention to the appraisal report, which is at 12A in Schedule 6?
Can I add something or ask a question?
Yes, sir,
on
please.
that same point?
Yes, sir, please.
The appraisal, the intent that was mentioned earlier of the appraisal was for this tax appeal. So those interests should have been excluded from the appraisal.
They've been excluded from our filings because they were not relevant to our requirements. So it's my appreciation, again, I did not prepare the report. It's my appreciation that the report was done to evaluate every asset in the deal that was purchased by Perdido. But my requirements and my job is to report the things that are taxable directly to Perdido.
So Perdido purchased the whole package or only purchased?
No, they purchased, so there was, based on what my understanding, there was two deals. Perdido bought 100% of whatever package the package they bought. But that included things that we're not required to file LATs on in Louisiana, such as non-operated mineral interest. And so, but all of that was valued in Mr. Calvanico's report. But for our filings and our appeal functions, we've only dealt with the items that were reportable on the LAT 12.
That's
Well,
why Mr. Holden said only 63 wells that they were
Correct.
responsible for plug and banding. That's where the 75,000 came in.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, if the appraisal included assets
Yes, sir.
that you are not required to file for,
Yes, sir.
then how are we supposed to know in that appraisal what shouldn't be included?
If you look at the appraisal.
And we can show you that in the appraisal in the Schedule 6.
Okay.
There's a reference in that to how we
Yeah.
determined that was operated and non-operated.
Yeah, one of my concerns about the appraisal is that there seems to be a lot of statements, but I'm having difficulty following the arithmetic. So, yeah, please point that out to me so we can see that at the appropriate time.
And that's where we are right now.
Okay.
So in the appraisal report, which is at 12A, and Schedule 6 of the appraisal report,
Okay, bear with me.
So we're in 12A?
12A, the appraisal report.
Schedule 6.
Schedule 6.
And what page is that on?
It's not a numbered page, but it's,
Then-
Following the report itself, Mr. Chairman, there's some schedules, and it's Schedule 6.
So it's in the appendix?
Yes, sir.
yes.
Hold on.
Small print.
So if you look at the column it's headed op/non-op. This is 1, 2, 3, 4.
Where is it?
It's the 8th column from the left.
Okay, I think I got it.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so that's the overwhelming majority of the variant between Mr. Calvanico's number and what we reported.
Say that again now?
That's the variant between what we reported and Mr. Calvanico reported is the 8. That's why our number's 8.5 and his was much larger. Was the non-ops identified in that column? On the 8th column on Schedule 6.
So what you're saying is the non-ops are excluded?
They're excluded from my filings because the operator of record, whoever is the op on that, would have filed the LAT to the parish, not us,
So you're filing for the, which one?
for the operated. For anything that you would look and see Perdido, Louisiana is the operator of record. It would be very confusing to the assessors, I would think, if all the interest owners filed LATs.
So there's only 8 on this chart, am I counting that correct?
No, sir.
That says op,
No, sir, there's about, it's,
or is it another page that it starts on?
may I show you the page I'm looking at, sir?
Yeah.
May I come around?
Yeah.
You got it, Mr. Berkshire?
Am I at the right page? Okay. Well, I mean, I'm counting the number that say op, OP.
Yes, sir.
No, the end.
There's,
There's non-op and op on here.
an op is what we reported.
Okay, so that's eight that say op.
No, sir, there's many
No, I'm
more
looking
than
at the
that.
No, there's a lot more.
You got two.
May I come around with the book to see what I'm looking at?
Is it this other page here? Okay, oh, all right. Okay,
Yeah, I think it's around
Schedule
60.
6, Schedule 6, Mr.
Schedule
West.
6.
So that's the reconciliation between the 10,003,304,
The 10,860,000,
okay, and the
8.5.
8.5.
8.5
Yes, sir.
is there a schedule anywhere that shows what the op total is?
That would be that page 14, number 14 we were looking, no, what was that?
That's Exhibit 13. What's been rendered is the operating, or the wells
So
that
the
are
grand-
operating.
The grand total there, the 8.5 million would be if we added up each one of those
Yes, sir.
lines that say op,
Yes, sir.
based on the fair market final column.
Yes, sir.
And there's Schedule 6. See my eye doctor.
Now, each one of these wells has assessment number.
Not each well, no, sir.
Okay. How they identified for the assessor?
I will tell you, I don't know the population of the assessment. Some parishes may put a lot of wells on one assessment, and some may give one assessment per each well, and I honestly did not memorize exactly how that went. But for the most part, I would think it's mostly one well, one assessment. And then you're also going to have some for the pipelines and things in there.
So the non-op wells are reported by someone else?
Yes, sir, correct. I doubt seriously they escaped taxation.
You know how many of those there were?
40-some?
47?
43 or something like that, whatever, yeah, yes. It would, it's my memory that it's like 43, 63, something like that. I can count it if that would be helpful.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
It just leads to the question, how did Perdido, it actually end up being assessed to them to start with?
Sir, I don't understand.
Is this a responsibility of the taxpayer or not?
To file the LAT?
Yeah, if it's not something that it operates, it's not the responsibility.
Not to, they will ultimately have to pay tax on it at some point, as part of their jib, but they're jibbed from their partner. So it does, I mean, there is some, I guess, value to that interest. So I'm assuming that's why it was added to the, but for our purposes, we've not included that in any of the discussions or to avoid that complexity.
There's never been a comparison between what the operator may have reported on these wells.
No, sir, I wouldn't necessarily have access to that.
Okay.
And that's why we focused our attention solely on what we could have something to do with. And you will find that when you match the numbers up exactly, there's about a 3% variant to the assessors. When we were doing the back and forth trying to get it all balanced out, there's about a 3% variant that you'll find when you add the 8.5 and the non-op, and that's to the net to the assessors overall. Since it was 3%, we did not try to go back and dig it out.
And let me state one other thing. I may have misstated when you, I think Mr. Wagaspack asked about the difference. Actually, the 8.5 is not just the wells. Schedule 6 is the wells, but the 8.5 includes also the pipelines and the equipment, which is a nominal amount. The wells are about 10,360,000 of the 304 of the 10,860,000 valuation.
So it's the lion's share.
Right, it's a lion's share. So there is a little bit of a variant, in addition to the 8.5, that includes the related equipment in the pipeline.
But that would be in the 8.5 number. It would be reflected in what we have filed.
But the OP designation, that's all, including what we just,
Yes,
you
sir,
just said.
correct.
It's
OP
in that
plus all the,
8.5.
any equipment identified and things like that. Yes, sir.
8.5, okay.
Yes, sir.
So there's really no dispute over the initial calculations?
No, sir. The
real
assessors
dispute is
followed.
over obsolescence?
No, the assessor, they followed the rules. We didn't
Okay.
find anything out of line.
Okay.
It gets down to obsolescence. Yes, sir.
So back to 12A
Yes, ma'am.
and Schedule 6, which is the wells.
Yes, ma'am.
The wells have a parish designation, do they not?
Yes, ma'am, they do.
And in Schedule 12C, I'm sorry, Exhibit 12C,
Yes, ma'am.
which is the valuation of the wells summarized by parish.
Yes, ma'am.
So 12A and 12C are the same, substantively the same. And can you explain to us what 12C is, even though it's not your exhibit?
12C is basically the summary of the data on Schedule 6. It's my appreciation.
And sorted in what way?
Sorted by parish.
Just for ease of reference?
Yes, ma'am, makes it a lot more simple to look at.
So the information from 12A in the appraisal report can be identified by parish, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, turn your attention to the following page after Schedule 6, which is the wells, to Schedule 7 in the appraisal report,
This would be what exhibit?
12A.
12A, yes, ma'am. Okay. Got it?
Which is the equipment that is associated with the oil and gas properties.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you also identify, or could the equipment on this schedule also be identified by parish?
Yes, ma'am, the well names correspond to parishes that were identified on Schedule 6. I think
So, looking at this, you could determine which parish and this equipment sits by looking at this?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, and we were very careful too, because this was a brand-new acquisition, and we got the prior year filings from the former operator, and we replicated exactly their format, their style, so everything was exactly as the assessors had been used to seeing. So the format of it and the detail we had and everything we had, we provided exactly as had been provided by the previous operator.
And each assessor's office got a copy of each? 13?
Yes, sir. Everybody got a full set of everything. They got the full appraisal and the full purchase sale. With each
No,
parish got
what
that.
he's asking is his valuation or your summary.
Your summary.
So we would have provided an individual LAT 12 as required for each one. And I mean, it's not normal that we've summarized those for our compliance for people. We file for lots of companies, but if anybody ever asked me to do that, we could do it. It wouldn't be that hard. But because they're individual assessments, we deal with the individual assessment.
You're kind of
level.
talking as if you provided this document to the
Right.
assessor.
Oh, no, I did
Yeah,
not mean to
that's why I
imply that. I'm
mentioned the
sorry. No,
question.
I did not mean to imply that.
Okay, so
No,
you
no,
you
sir.
hadn't provided?
No, sir, no,
Okay.
no. I didn't, sorry. Didn't mean to imply that at all.
Okay.
But if you look at the Exhibit 7 in the big book, under each, those are the payment under protest documents. And they would have a summary of, should have a spreadsheet attached along with a summary listing the tax amounts, the different values, the disputed and undisputed amounts. So there are summaries that were provided to each parish in Exhibit 7.
Talking about 7 by each parish?
Seven by each parish, correct.
I think what I saw was 11, here. They've been different by a few parishes. I saw the letter and I saw the checks.
Right, so if you look, I mean, Acadia only had one, so there was no,
I got you.
no listing. But if you look in Beauregard, for example, under 7,
Yeah, I see.
then behind the cover letter, then there is a distinction, and it lists every assessment number. And then also the undisputed and disputed tax amounts that would go with each of the assessment numbers.
I see.
And although Exhibit 7 is technically a payment under protest document that is submitted to the sheriff, there is always a copy submitted to the assessor. And in the documents, there is an acknowledgement by each of the assessor's office signing that they received a copy.
So in Beauregard, for example, which that's the bulk of it, right?
Beauregard and Rapides have about the same number of assessments.
The valuation of well summary is 6.135, and what was reported is 5,506,000. So that difference is part of that difference between the 10.3 and the 8.5. Right. The non-op, I guess the non-op.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this would just be a representative sample of what was on the other spreadsheet.
Okay.
Okay.
We have no further questions for Mr. Frederickson.
Any questions?
Just, Mr. Frederickson,
Yes, sir.
I guess put this in colloquial terms, you are what is commonly referred to as the tax representative or tax rep
Yes, sir.
for Perdido on these matters, and you are the interface with the assessors on behalf of the company,
Yes, sir.
correct? And I think you actually, in response to a question by Chairman Shahard, answered my primary question, and that was that the renditions, the LAT forms that were filed with the assessors were all based upon application of the cost approach and the tables appearing in the Louisiana Tax Commission guidelines.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct?
We made the filings from the commission guidelines, and then we, again, made an adjustment for obsolescence to those to match Mr. Calvanico's.
And you earlier testified that you backed into Mr. Calvanico's obsolescence
Yes, sir. I
figures.
mean, for lack of a better way of explaining it, yes, sir.
Well, can you elaborate on that and explain?
Yes, sir,
What you meant when you said you backed into them?
Yes, sir. So what we wanted to be careful and do is we wanted to make sure that we didn't present something that was not in a format that the assessors were not used to getting.
Okay.
So we prepared our LATs as we would normally with the schedules as they existed. We had Mr. Calvanico's report, which was the number that we were trying to get to to let the assessor know we were trying to ask for on the value. And so each one of those, we calculated the percentage obsolescence it would take to get from the calculated number from the Tax Commission rules to Mr. Calvanico's numbers. Is that helpful?
Slightly.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to hand you what's already marked as Perdido Energy Louisiana Exhibit Number 3 for Beauregard Parish. And it's a rather thick document.
Yes, sir.
But I just want you to go to the first page where you are listing the obsolescence reduction
Yes,
that
sir.
is being requested.
Yes, sir, it's right here.
And that would have been the second page in that document under the cover letter, correct?
Depending on how these were sorted, sometimes it would be the third page.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I don't know that the copies matched how they were, so, because the cover page.
They may have been
always say-
missorted?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a form that has a title, Personal Property Tax Report Summary, Oil and Gas Property 2000 Year 18.
Yes, sir.
And can you show me where the obsolescence reduction is on that property?
Yes, sir, it's right here.
There's a line item that says
Economic
economic obsolescence, 86.41%.
1%, and then we show the answer underneath that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, so there's a line item on this document that says economic obsolescence, 86.41%,
Yes, sir, that's correct.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And when we were going through these documents, and particularly the appraisal with Mr. Calvanico, I never saw an 86.41% obsolescence. Can you tell me how you calculated that 86.41% reduction?
Yes, sir. It was literally, we calculated, and I can show you. If you follow the form on the front page, you can see that we followed the standard, the serial number, the well numbers, all the statuses and all that. We arrive at the calculation of value that using the schedules.
Right.
We take that compared to Schedule 6 for Mr. Calvanico and calculated the obsolescence required to get to Mr. Calvanico's number from this number.
Okay, so the number reported on the renditions was nothing but a derived number, and a derived number, as you stated earlier, to back into Mr. Calcanico's valuation.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
To put it in a format the assessors could use. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And I want to make sure, you're not suggesting or testifying today that any assessor, again, for any of the 5 parishes, Acadia, Beauregard, Evangeline, Rapides, or Vernon, failed to correctly apply the valuation tables for either oil and gas wells or pipelines, are you?
No, sir, I'm not.
Are you suggesting that any of them failed to apply the depreciation tables for either oil and gas wells or pipelines promulgated by the Tax Commission?
No, sir, I'm not.
So I guess really to clarify what I think is the central point, as Chairman Shahardy pointed out, what we're talking about, the point of dispute, is obsolescence.
Yes, sir, because of the methodology, yes, sir. I mean, I don't know, I could over-elaborate, but yes,
Okay.
sir, that's the answer.
Well, then let me put a little more bluntly. Why do you believe the assessor's valuations are incorrect? What error do you believe they committed?
I believe that the schedules in this circumstance, without added additional obsolescence, did not arrive at a value that matched what our expert appraiser came up with.
Well, wait a second, but do the rules and regulations say that the assessors are supposed to base their assessments on an expert appraiser?
No, but it says they can consider extra obsolescence, outside obsolescence. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah, no, it says that they
Yes, sir.
can.
And I think that's what we're what we're asking for.
And is it your contention that the assessors erred in not granting that obsolescence reduction?
Well, I mean, I think that I would have much appreciated if they had applied it.
I understand that. Is it your position that they committed an error in not granting it? Or are you asking this tax commission to grant that obsolescence reduction?
I'm asking the tax commission to look at what we have provided compared to the schedules and consider the obsolescence that was not allowed by the assessor.
And so do you believe it was an error on the part of the assessors for Arcadia, Beauregard, Abandon, Rapides, and Vernon? Was it an error for them to not grant that reduction?
I guess if we're looking for a yes or no answer, yes, sir, I guess it would have to be an error.
Okay. And why do you believe that was an error on their part?
Because we had an expert look at this, appraise it, and the schedules are derived to use. Maybe this helps a little bit. So when we think about, when we use schedules are supposed to be used in the absence of actual information. And we feel like we've provided actual information.
Great. What actual information did you provide to the assessors?
An appraisal report and a PSA.
Okay. Now, the appraiser testified, you were here when Mr. Calvanico testified earlier, were you not?
I was.
He testified, and his quote was, "I received a great deal of information from the company."
Yes,
And he
sir.
went through what he had received, and you were here when he testified.
Yes, sir.
Financial, engineering reports.
Yes, sir.
Did you provide any of that information
I wasn't
to the
privy to that
assessors?
information, sir. My role here was as compliance.
What was,
I was I presented information as a consultant, not as an appraiser. I don't know if that's the
okay.
answer.
I'm trying to get my arms around exactly what that means.
I did not have the information the appraiser used to do his valuation.
And therefore, the assessors did not have that information, did they?
Well, they had a certified appraisal from a certified appraiser.
That wasn't my question. Did they have the information,
sir.
the financials, the engineering reports?
No, sir, they did not have the detail.
And why was that information not provided to the assessors?
I've never been asked ever for an appraisal. Anytime the certified appraisal's been given, I've never had anyone ask me for the data behind one.
And so in this case, you chose not to do so?
I didn't have it to provide, sir.
Could you have gotten it? Could you have asked for it?
I guess I could have. If an assessor had asked me for it, I would have asked Mr. Holden for it.
Okay, but more importantly, you did not provide any of that
No,
information
sir, I
to
did
the
not.
assessors?
No, sir, I did not.
You are familiar with the general practice and procedure for appraisals in the state of Louisiana, are you not?
You talking about for these oil and gas assets?
For oil and gas assets and
Yes, sir.
pipeline
Yes,
assets?
sir.
Have you ever heard of obsolescence being granted based upon the depth of a well?
I can't speak to how the obsolescence was calculated, sir. I'm not an appraisal expert.
Well, you were here earlier when Mr. Calvanico testified that he gave obsolescence reductions of 25, 50, and in some cases 75% based upon the depth of a well.
I believe what he said, sir, was that he used that to scale the obsolescence he had calculated. I think it was a component.
Right, and is there anything regarding the depth of the well being an obsolescence factor that appears in the rules and regulations adopted by the
No, sir,
Louisiana Tax Commission?
not directly, but we do value every well on its depth bracket, and we use an amount per foot for depth bracket.
Right, but as well depth increases under those brackets, values go up, do they not?
They do, and there has been times over the years, as you know, I've been around these a long time, sometimes they, as technology gets better, some of the brackets can occasionally go down, but generally they do go up.
No, but as you move through the brackets, the deeper the well, the higher its value,
Oh,
correct?
yes, sir, that's correct.
And so what Mr. Calvanico was doing was the deeper the well, the higher the obsolescence reduction, was he not?
Yes, I can't speak to why his calculation, I think he would have to explain that to you.
Well, he tried to, and I've been doing this a long time, and it was a total loss to me.
I wouldn't attempt to say.
Have you ever heard of obsolescence being granted on a pipeline because of general economic conditions?
I mean, economic obsolescence would be a part of anything, yes, sir.
But normally, economic obsolescence is proven by evidence of a financial loss, is it not?
It could be, but it could be global to the industry if the entire industry was taking a hit. I mean, it could be.
And would that not be addressed in the tables? I mean, doesn't your industry sector come in every year and address those factors with the tax commission when it's building those tables?
Yes, sir, but all that data comes from public sources, just like Mr. Calvanico pulled it from.
So, but are market factors not considered in promulgation of the tables by the Louisiana Tax Commission?
We're using cost tables is my belief. I apologize, I don't directly work on the schedule, that chapter 13 very often.
Okay. Other than their rejection of Perdito's request for additional obsolescence reductions, is there any error that any of the 5 assessors, again, Acadia, Beauregard, Evangeline Rapides, and Vernon, committed in these assessments?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's purely obsolescence?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. No further questions.
I have just a few follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, first of all, Mr. Frederickson, Mr. Eddington has questioned you about the deeper the well, he has stated that the higher the value. Is it also true that the deeper the well, the much higher the cost?
It is, and again, with all the different pieces that go in, cost doesn't always equate to value.
So you testified earlier about communications with the assessors. You had submitted your cover letter with your intention to meet with every one of the assessors' offices to discuss the filings, the rendition packages. And you had to follow up on those letters because there was no response. So again, please explain those communications. So in those communications, whether it be email or phone, so did any assessor request any of the information that was used to formulate the appraisal report by Mr. Calvanico?
No, ma'am.
Did any of the assessor or anyone in their office request to communicate with Mr. Calvanico about the appraisal report?
No, ma'am.
Did any of the assessors or anybody in their office have any questions at all about anything in the appraisal report?
No, ma'am, not to my knowledge.
So in our small exhibit book, we've got some excerpts of the Tax Commission's rules and regulations. So if you look at tab 15 in the small book, which I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Chapter 9, the guidelines for ascertaining the fair market value of oil and gas properties.
Yes, ma'am.
And would you please turn, there's no page, oh, well, it is.
It's OG5.
OG5, that
Yes,
is
ma'am.
correct. So under 907A, could you please read the second sentence that begins with functional?
Yes, ma'am. Functional and/or economic obsolescence shall be considered in the analysis of fair market value as substantiated by the taxpayer in writing.
And then we'll turn the page to OG6.
Yes, ma'am.
And number 6 is adjustments for allowance of economic obsolescence. And it is lettered there. Could you please read letter C?
Yes, ma'am. Deduct any additional obsolescence that has been appropriately documented by the taxpayer as warranted to reflect market value.
Now I'll turn your attention to Exhibit 16,
Okay.
and that is Chapter 13 pipelines.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you turn the page to PL3?
Yes, ma'am.
And the first letter F there. Could you read that first and second sentence?
Yes, ma'am. Assessment will be based on fair market value. Functional and/or economic obsolescence shall be considered in the analysis of fair market value as substantiated by the taxpayer in writing.
That says shall, does it not?
Yes, ma'am.
It doesn't say may.
Yes, ma'am.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the witnesses that we have.
That's it? Okay.
Okay, Mr.
Do we need
Chairman,
to take
I'll
another-
try
do we
and
need to
briefly-
take another break, or can we keep going?
I'm good at the,
Yeah, okay, no, okay. All right.
Commissioners, the first joint witness for each of the 5 assessors, I'd like to call Mr. Rodney Crett.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to just register an objection. Mr. Eddington did not file any kind of witness list in advance of this hearing. Mr. Eddington told me that that's not required to file, but he did not file a witness list. It is my understanding, although I've never met this witness, that he's an expert in the area of appraisal. There's been no report that's been produced. I have no idea who he is or what he's going to say, and so I have an objection to that. And so, because we have not been able to fairly assess anything that he may say. and have been given no advance notice, which would have been very easy to do over a week ago. We followed up with Mr. Eddington over a week ago, asking for an exhibit list, and we received no response. So we object to this witness's testimony.
Well, we're going to go ahead and let Mr. Craig testify. We'll rule on all these objections at the appropriate time.
Because we are not going to know what he has to say, we're not prepared, I think it's unfair for me to even ask any questions of him. So would the chairman
Well, we
consider
can-
keeping the
we can
hearing
s-
open for additional testimony at a later date?
Say again now?
Because I'm unprepared
Okay.
to ask him any questions, and even confer with my experts about his testimony. I've received no report. Would the chairman be open, and would the commission be open to keeping this hearing open, to assessing his testimony at a later date?
Mr. Chairman, I would, clearly object to that. Again, up until several years ago, the rules and regulations did provide for the filing of a witness list. That requirement was deleted from the Tax Commission's rules and regulations. Very seldom do you see witness lists. Now, I will tell you, Mr. Craig is not going to be giving any opinion of value today. I think that opposing counsel has ample opportunity to ask any questions they may have today, and after many, many months delay in getting this particular hearing set, I think initially we were set for hearing back in March, that any further delay is just pointless.
Let's take a 5-minute break.